have something special for you. The board, I know you told me not to award you anything, but the board of directors, the organizing committee wanted you to have this.
Run, Bonnie, run.
Are you ready?
She always works hard.
It's a gift certificate for a shampoo, a hair set, and I can't mention this other thing they're going to do here. But this is for you, dear. Let's have it for Bonnie. I'm subbing for Paul Smith tonight. He's scheduled for some knee surgery. And I talked to his doctor, and the doctor has informed me that he's going to be just fine. The doctor said he is going to have to stop spending so much time on his knees. So, Paul, I hope you take that to heart.
I love it.
Yeah, very religious.
We'd like to recognize the people who put these dinners together because they really are nice. Gives us all a chance to see one another every 5 or 6 years, whenever. And of course, those people most responsible include the lovely Barbara Orwig, the lovely Jean Stiers, the beautiful Marilyn Moyer, the adorable Bonita Beatrice, the foxy Pat Smith, and of course Sandra Davis as well. So, how about that group? And sincere thanks, of course, to George Rundag for your thoughtful and respectful invocations that you've delivered over the years, and also to Willie Weber, who performed one evening here as an MC. And I know you all remember that.
Yeah.
So how about a hand for those two guys? Now on the program menu, you probably noticed something about an homage to Paul Smith. And I looked at that and I thought, what the hell is this? An homage to Paul Smith? It's serious. So we're going to call it a drive-by shooting, I think, because I think that's more apropos. And I want you to know that Paul, I first met him, I think it was circa 1945. 1940?
4.
Oh, 4. Thank you, Paul. Glad we got that straight. He was a leader in academics. I know you'll all remember that at Rosecrans and St. Thomas. And he was an outstanding student in general. I can remember he also dominated the glee club with his high-pitched falsetto voice. I'll never forget that. Now, not many of you know that Paul has been married twice, and Dee, this is going to come as a shock to you. His first wife was an illegal immigrant from Zimbabwe, and she was a lovely young lady, Moesha Calhoun Johnson. Lovely. She was the lead drummer with the Nairobi Trio. You remember the old Ernie Kovacs show? Well, she was the lead drummer on that show. And Paul, in an attempt to impress his girlfriend, his bride-to-be, went out and bought her 2 50-gallon oil drums. And Moesha would beat on those drums until she would wear out the drumsticks. And Paul would have to go to Big Bear and buy another chicken. And he told me that Moesha had carried bundles of firewood on her head when she was in Zimbabwe, between various villages. And as a result, she developed a great sense of balance. So much so that you could put a glass of beer on her head, a bowl of potato chips, she wouldn't spill a thing. And Paul said that was kind of like finding gold. And it was very handy when he watched television, when he was watching football. Well, eventually, about 3 months later, and 28 chickens, Paul and Moesha moved to Columbus, Ohio, and they rented an apartment there. And about a week after the marriage ceremony, Moesha had a fine young baby boy that they called Vernon David Smith. But for short, they just called him VD. So there they were in their apartment, their love nest, with Moesha banging away all night, and VD running rampant. But unfortunately, oh, by the way, Paul, I saw VD this evening. He parked my car for me. Unfortunately, the marriage didn't last. They got a divorce, and which really upset me, because I think once you marry someone, that you should stay married for the rest of your miserable life. Well, a few years went by. Paul climbed the corporate ladder at Sherwin-Williams, a single rung. He moved up from stock boy to general manager. And Paul developed an uncanny ability. He could actually tell the color of paint just by inhaling fumes from the can. And if you've talked to Paul recently, you will immediately be able to tell he's inhaled a lot of paint. Well, after a few years of trying unsuccessfully to tree every woman in Zanesville, he finally settled down. He married the lovely Dee Mansfield, and he's raised a fine family. He enjoys a fine home locally. He has a resort-style oceanfront condo in Florida. I visited him a couple of years ago there, and he just installed new mud flaps and tires on his house there. Very impressive. And prior to that, he visited me on the island of Maui. And my wife and I, it was either number 2 or 3, I can't remember which, we met him at Kahului Airport. And first thing Paul said to me in a very low voice, he said, "Rod, do you think you can hook me up with a good lay while I'm here on Maui?" And I said, "Sure, probably. Get you something at the airport, the gift shop." And he said, "Oh, no, we can't do that. Got to wait till Dee is asleep at the hotel, and then you and I will go out and have a couple of drinks, and you can line me up with something." I thought, this is kind of strange just to buy a necklace made out of flowers. But I didn't say anything to Paul. And we walked a few more steps, and he turned to me and he said, "Rod, how much is a lay going to cost me here?" And I said, "Well, on Maui, probably between 30 and 50 bucks. But I assured him it would last a long time, and the aroma would be really nice." And Paul said, "Well, back in Zanesville, I never paid more than $10, and they never lasted more than 5 minutes, and the aroma was not all that good." So I really missed Paul when he left. A little tear kind of formed here in the eye. And prior to tonight's gathering, I had a conversation with him, and he recalled the time that he took a supporter, athletic supporter, from a gym bag at school and placed it in a lunchbox belonging to an unsuspecting Rosecrans female student. So he and I went to the cafeteria, waited for her to show up, and you could tell by the expression on her face she was looking forward to her kielbasa sandwich. She opened the lunchbox and was very embarrassed, turned red, threw it on the floor. And I asked Paul, if he'd returned that athletic supporter to its rightful owner. And he said, no, he still had it. I said, you still have it? He said, yes, he keeps it under his pillow. He slept with it since graduation, under his pillow. So I talked to him, and he agreed to bring it in tonight. And later on, we will present that artifact to its rightful owner. Well, now on the serious side for just a moment, I consider Paul a much cherished pal, a man with a great sense of humor, good father and husband, and a real man. And Paul, I would like to present you with something you never got on Maui.
Another way?
We had this flown in this morning from Maui. It's still very fresh. And all your classmates sent in checks to pay for it. All the checks cleared except one from Miami. So Paul, if you'll come forth and get your lay. What a guy. Let's have a hand for Paul.
I do have to tell you that, yes, when we arrived on Maui, we checked into the condo we'd rented, and the girl at the desk said, "You have a gift in the refrigerator." So I'm thinking, well, this is a classy place, you know, bottle of wine, some cheese, whatever. And we got up there and opened, this is serious. When I opened the refrigerator, there were two beautiful, beautiful Hawaiian leis. My buddy. And that also reminds me of the time he tooted on that damn saxophone in the basement of the St. Thomas School and played My Buddy. And we all had to sit there and listen to it, and I like to threw up. Thank you.
You're welcome, Paul. Well, as you all know, St. Thomas and St. Nick were merged and became Rosecrans. But did you know the rationale behind the decision to do that? Well, I'm going to reveal that to you tonight. Bishop Reedy had flown to Zanesville in a helicopter, and he dropped leaflets on Dillon State Park directing all the priests in Zanesville to report to Columbus. What? Am I out of line? Well, in those days, the only thing I knew about St. Nick was their playground was a lot different than the one at St. Thomas. St. Thomas Playground had a basketball court, shuffleboard, volleyball, nicely landscaped. The nuns were on duty to provide cookie and milk. And we would play chess, and we had a great time. Now, the St. Nick Playground had a 10-foot high chain link fence around it. It was topped off with razor wire. And I remember there was a guard tower in one corner of the playground. And for recreation, they had one device in the center of the playground, and that was a tire hanging on a chain. And I remember the nuns carried high voltage cattle prods. Now, the bishop was keenly aware that the students of St. Nick were prohibited from using pens or pencils or anything with a sharp point, and were allowed only to write with red crayons. And so the diocesan decision was that they would call the new school Rosecrans. Now, you have the rest of the story. Now, with the merger completed, we all settled in for our final years of schooling in Zanesville. And you know, our school really excelled in sports, thanks to some really tremendous athletes like Leo DiDonatis, Bill Durant, Wilf Mailing, Jim Davis, Harold Grayton, and of course Bob Roll. I talked to Bob's gorgeous wife tonight, and she said that Bob doesn't play basketball anymore, but he dribbles quite a bit around the house. You may remember the nicknames we had. Bob Morris was Malt. Harold Grayton was Ginny. Barbara Orwig was B.A. Bonita Beatrice was Bo. Paul Smith was Smitty. And my nickname was Suck. I acquired that most unfortunate nickname, as you may remember, from a perception that I sucked up to my teachers, which of course was absolutely untrue. I can remember students at Rosecrans calling my home on Brighton Boulevard. My father would answer the phone, and the voice on the other end would say, "Mr. Williams, can I talk to Suck?" And of course my father would ask me, "Rod, Boy, do your friends call you suck. And it took me a while to explain that. In high school, there were those puppy love romances that developed that we all remember to this day so vividly. There was Bob and Mary Beth, Malt and Dixie, Jerry and Sandy, Wayne and Pat, George Rundag and his pet rabbit. You remember that? I remember that rabbit, George. Teeth knocked out, ears all stretched out of shape. Poor little defenseless buggered bunny. It seems to me that George sold that to Bill Durant for $200 and some, as I recall. And I don't know what happened to it after that. I definitely want to. And there were other love affairs then. You probably remember that, let's see, that love triangle between Tony Durant, Pat Smith, and Phil Liston. As you know, Pat was able to break up Tony and Phil and marry Phil. And, of course, Bonita was telling everybody how much she loved Dick. And so did Sally Holmes, Dick Andrews, and Dick Bob. And Leo and I were and still are in love with Barbara Starrett. Isn't that right, Leo?
Always.
Always, yes. And speaking of Anita, she's become a very successful real estate agent, as you all know, along with Mary Jane Levy, both having sold a whole bunch of ghetto and white trash property over the years. They both drive Cadillacs, and the trunks are stuffed full of money. And Bonita got started early in real estate. She leased an apartment while she was in high school. And some of you probably remember that. It was a select group. Her parents certainly didn't know about it. But she's advised me tonight that she's not going to renew the lease on that apartment. And she has asked me to request that anybody in this room who has a key to Bonita's apartment, please bring it up now, because it would like she wants to turn it in. So if you would bring it up, we've got a bowl here. Okay, we have that artifact I was talking about, and it's right here. We want to return to its rightful owner tonight. And I don't think I'm going to take it out. I don't think that would be too discreet. So what I will do is I will describe it, and we'll return it to its rightful owner. Ew. It looks like it's a standard size athletic supporter. But in the place of the cup, this one has a little sewing thimble. And I can just make out an inscription on it. It says, property of Leo D. Donatus. You can pick this up a little later on. Well, I know this one's probably way too big for you now. But that's the way it goes. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about Charlie Bone. And I have Mary's permission to do so. Paul and I spent some time with Charlie a few days before Charlie passed away. And he was still the same Charlie that we all knew. He had a great sense of humor, as evidenced by what happened in his bedroom the day that Paul and I were visiting. At Charlie's behest, Paul and I took a handbell, the kind the nuns used to have, you know, that they would ring like a town crier might use, that had an upward protruding handle. we lifted the sheets on Charlie's bed, and we put the handbell up under the sheets and positioned it twixt Charlie's legs. Then we called Mary to come in. We said, Charlie has something for you, Mary. And so Mary comes charging around the corner. And here's Charlie. It looked a lot like this. Well, you get the idea. And we all sat down and we had a great laugh. So he had a sense of humor right up to the very end. He said something to me that I want to pass on. And that is, he shook my hand, he said, Rod, someday we will meet again. And you know, I got to thinking about that, and I think he's absolutely right. I think that everyone in this room, all of us, will meet again someday. Whether it's next year's or the next reunion, I guess it won't be next year, or whether it's a reunion in another dimension, like up there in the clouds, if you will. There's probably a class of 52 reunion going on right now. And on that organization committee up there in the clouds, probably Nina Bruni, Sarah Burkhart, Sue Smith, Margaret Burgess, and Nancy Hempler. Charlie's probably the MC. Tom Gray is going to lead them in prayer. Joe Dickinson will be greeting people at the door. And the skit will be presented probably by Tom Wardian, Ila Mae Corda, Patty Emmert, and Francis Toole. And I'm pretty confident I know what the menu will be. That will be probably cheeseburgers, French fries, and really thick chocolate milkshakes from the Brown Cow Drive-In. And dessert will consist of cherry cokes and hot fudge sundaes from Cat's Wings. Thank you all.